So what I was kind of hoping to do is could talk about PvE and talk about PvP. So kind of go from genre to genre. We'll talk about PvE first, then talk about PvP, and then kind of go through each one of these classes and just get your guys' opinions on how the class currently stands. And if it doesn't have to be like 100% you're correct about everything. It's more about I want to get everyone's opinions on how you think the class feels to play, where you think the biggest fallacies are for each of these classes, for each of these genres in particular, like PvE first and PvP, and kind of do it that way. And the reason for this is hopefully we can send some feedback, because I know they've been asking for some feedback in particular around class balances. So I thought it'd be a good idea to get people to know. I know a lot of you guys know some of your classes way better than I know any of them. So it would be good to get everyone's kind of feedback on here. And for the sake of the people watching the videos, or whoever ends up uploading this later, maybe we can do kind of a roll call and explain who you are, how you know the game, etc.
Sure.
So maybe let's start with Amber Turd.
Hey guys, I'm Amber Turd. I am a PvP player on the West Coast, technically the far west in Hawaii. And I've been playing Diablo for a very long time. So I actually started playing Blizzard games in War 2 Battle.net Edition. And I'm pretty avid Diablo 2 and Diablo 3 hardcore player. So that's pretty much my story that I'm going to share right now.
And then we have Lita, which YouTuber. And Lita, how are you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me. I play a free-to-play character as well as a large whale, and I've played all classes on both as well. So I'd like to experience the game from all aspects, so to speak, and kind of give insight on to how I feel things like balance or just the game feels overall.
And then we have Sugar Rat, which I believe you're a Necromancer player, if I got that correct off the top of my head.
That is correct, and thank you for having me. Yep, I'm Sugar Rat. I stream on PvP on Twitch. Also a large whale at 7.2k resonance, but generally play PvP with the in the highest bracket on the East Coast with some of the top players in the game, and really focused on PvP balance and kind of the core mechanics of the game and theory crafting around Necromancer class.
Lovely. Well, it's good to have you today to talk about Necro then. And then we have Tone and Hop as well.
Hey, yeah, I'm on the East Coast. I've played Necro is my third class now. Not a big whale, but on the 5,000 range. I like competitive. Pretty much my content is towards fair play, being competitive, and I guess being creative and trying to beat people like Sugar Rat in VG.
All right. Well, thanks for coming as well. And just real quick, what's everyone's class? What you play? Amber, what class you play?
I'm currently a Barbarian. I've been a Barbarian for less than a week. I started as a Necro at launch, and that's probably the class I played the longest. I also played a Satyr and a Wiz.
Okay, and I've played all of them, but namely Necro and a little bit of Barbarian here more released recently. And Lita, you said you played all of them?
Played all of them, free-to-play and whale, but I would say most people recognize me as the whale monk.
Gotcha, okay. And Sugar Rat, I think you said Necromancer. Did you play much of the other ones?
I played around with a few other classes, and I'm familiar with all of their kits, especially as they relate to the current BG meta.
And Toten, do you have any class in particular you're more specialized in?
I want to say I played more Crusader. I have more of a passion for the Crusader than most class. I'm loving the Necro now, but I'm ready to change to something else as well to experience something new. But I started as a monk. Started as a monk.
Okay, good. So we have a pretty good spread then. Seems like we have a pretty decent spread here of what people play. And I'm going to start from the top. So how we're going to do it is we're going to start from PvE, and we're going to go through each of the classes, and then I'm just going to kind of open it up and ask you guys to talk about how you feel about the class. You can anything off the top of your head. If you have there's one big gaping hole, or if you think they're way too strong, have that. There's no right or wrong answers. Just kind of want to have a conversation about it. So starting with PvE, let's start with Barbarian. I'm going to be going in the order that you can create the heroes, basically, when you go create a hero. So starting with Barbarian in PvE, I'll start since I'm asking asking you guys to do the same. And for me, Barbarian is actually really fun in PvE more recently once I learned the Fire Sprint combination for PvE. That has made the game significantly more enjoyable for me in farming, because it seems, at least in my current resonance state at 3,000, I'm able to more or less kill most of the packs just by running past them, and for me that's been really fun. I really like Whirlwind. I feel like single target damage is maybe a little bit lacking, but I could not know the correct build for that as well. Anyone got opinions on Barbarian for PvE?
Well, I've been playing Barbarian for a week, but I feel like I'm pretty tanky and doing a lot of DPS, single target and mob damage. So I don't really have a lot of complaints on the Barbarian when it comes to PvE right now.
I think for Barbarian as well, it's important to note that they do have some support options that a lot of people, for whatever reason, are unaware of. And when I messed around with them on free to play, it was really refreshing to have things like the Battlemaster's Helm, which provide support buffs and big damage buffs to your party. Very underutilized, and I think that adds a lot of value to the class, but in general, their personal single target damage is very low in comparison to others.
I'm interested in class changing to a Barbarian now, as a matter of fact, just because I feel like they may perhaps be the next BG meta. But as far as deep into the Barbarian, I'm not on into the PvE side, just on the PvP side. It's just what I see other people playing Barbarians. To me, their survivability is insane. The momentum that a Barbarian has into a BG, the way that they can shift the momentum in a battleground is huge. I like the competitive play, and I feel like Barbarian would be a class that would fit kind of the style that I like to play, which is be supportive in ways of, to impact the battleground. That's what I see.
So as far as Barbarian goes in PvE, do we feel like it's at a decent enough state? There isn't any major buffs it needs to have. I know the single target damage for me feels a little bit lackluster, but I'm wondering if that's just a trade-off, because like Tonan's mentioning, the PvP, which we'll get to talking about the PvP in the moment, is significantly stronger. So maybe it's just a trade-off that they can't necessarily be amazing at everything. You think they're at an acceptable enough state?
Well, I think that, to the other speaker's point, I'm sorry I didn't catch who that was, the support build, I'm really interested in them enhancing that more, or providing more information, maybe some more content from the content creators. Because, what I felt was always really lacking was the Diablo 3 support Barb that would run the meta with the in the rifts, right? So you're pulling mobs, you're buffing your party. That's what I always thought this Barbarian was going to be, and it seemed like I didn't see a lot of support. So it's good to hear that being called out. So I think if they could enhance that more, that'd be very helpful in PvE.
I'm curious to see how a Barbarian would handle a very difficult challenge rift in a PvE mode, because
I'm glad you asked that question. That was one of the next things I wanted to ask, was how you guys feel about challenge rift viability of melee and Barbarian in particular.
I think Barbarian definitely is one of the classes that struggles with pushing high deficit challenge. I think if that was the one thing that would need to be adjusted for PvE, that would be my suggestion, is that they have, outside of a few different combinations of things with like demoralizing shout and the ability to taunt and hard CC, a huge amount of mobs with like chip of stone flesh, their ability to like push with high deficits is severely like limited compared to other like range classes. So like Necro or Wizards being the best, Necro being a close second, is probably where they don't shine nearly as bright. In overworld farming, they're top tier just because of the amount of movement speed and ability to spam abilities that are AoE abilities like Whirlwind, and keep that momentum going. There's almost best in class for open world, but yeah, Challenge Rift is definitely a place where they feel a little bit underwhelming, even at the highest kind of gear level and resonance level.
So then what I've got here is top tier overworld farming. Completely agree about that point. Challenge Rift struggles. Single target damage is lacking, but overall it's fun and in a decent state. You think that's a fair assessment of where he's at right now?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
let's talk about, if we're all in agreement with that, unless anyone has any other points in particular about PvE, let's move on to what Tonan's talking about in BG with the PvP. Now, I'm going to say it as a brain-dead PvP player who runs forward until I die. Barbarian is built for somebody like me, because all I have to do is stand on the point if we're pushing, or stand on the point if we're defending. It's the same thing. I stand in the blue circle and I'll wait for Undying, and then I die like a Muppet. And I can do that over and over again, and I can kind of contribute. So I kind of like Barbarian for the simplicity of that, which kind of fits the theme of Barbarian, the brain dead guy with an axe a little bit. But how you guys feel about Barbarian in PvP? Any points you want to make? Too strong? Not strong enough?
Yeah, I actually believe it's incredibly strong. And Tone and Hop mentioned on it a little bit, but the return of the Barb meta is already underway, and people are logging on to class change right now as they're listening to us, I believe. And what's happening is as the lethality increases, immunities like Conjuration of Light or Undying Rage actually become more powerful. And the issue here isn't really a class balance of the Barb itself. It's actually an unbalanced game mode. The battleground itself is not balanced. And there's a lot of factors here. It's really easy to forget that this battleground is also used for Rite of Exile. And typically the team on attack would have a Reckoning buff or perks like health globes when enemies die. So of course this battleground isn't balanced for daily play. And if we attempt to balance the Barbarian because of that, it's just going to make the matches unbalanced when it comes time for the Rite. So some of these class balances, and in PvE, it's okay to have trade-offs. Like we're saying, okay, they struggle in challenge rifts, but they have decent support builds and great open world farm. Well, in PvP, you kind of want everything to be an even playing field. And Barbarian is going to be incredibly powerful, and I don't think anything's going to take away from the Barb meta until we see a new class, potentially like Blood Knight or the Tempest that's been talked about, because there just won't be anything to rival it that'll actually get players to stop playing it.
Well, how do you stop one? The only way that I see, the only class I see stopping a Barbarian is a Necro with high CC. Because I don't see anybody else stopping a Barb. And like you mentioned, BGs are completely unbalanced. And if you go up against 3 Barbarians on the opposing team, and they play smart, you can't beat them. Like, it's impossible to win a match versus so many Barbarians.
Well, I wouldn't say it's impossible. I don't have problem handling Barbs on my Satyr, Necro, Wizard on my Barb. I don't even have the meta build yet. You just have to know how their mechanics work, when their Undying's popping, when they're vulnerable, staying out of the range of that big Whirlwind. Some of them are so stacked, though, that their Whirlwind, they chase you so quickly, and if you get near them, you're going to get fried. So you gotta use your range, you gotta kite them. You just have to learn how to counter them to do well, and that's kind of how it was initially. I would throw my head on the keyboard against monks, and every other day wanted to quit this game because of it. But I just learned how to counter the monks, and for some of the stronger monks, you can't, because they're just freaking insanely powerful. But if you can build your character to be defensive against them, a lot of people just go glass cannon. You've got to stack your defensive stats so you can survive first, and then you just take them down as a team or individually.
And I think to add on that, I don't think Barbs are unbeatable, but they do have an outsized advantage on defense. If you have multiple teams of Barb, we saw this prior to the cheat death nerf and some of the Strife attribute adjustments. Back when cooldown duration was not affected by Strife a few months ago, you would see Barbs with near 100% uptime on Undying. Like as soon as it was off cooldown, you had they would either have a cheat death or and you'd have real 7k plus or max Barbs basically be unkillable due to that. But on attack, they're a little bit lackluster, just because the current attack meta require, if you want to win on attack, you have to spawn camp or kind of cut off your opponent and not allow them to come back to the idols. Barbs are not particularly great at that. They generally will need another class to come support them in doing it. And they can be chased off. I will say though that Barb has a very versatile set of builds that they can run in battlegrounds. They have really high mobility, and a way to stay alive burst damage that is like almost second to none. It's viable at any resonance. Some of the even like though necromancers have a huge amount of CC in their kit. It's because of Undying Rage. It's invariant for the amount of res that you have to use pretty much the same amount of cooldowns for a 2K barb versus a 7K one. Just from a keeping them kind of off of you, and due to some of the essences that they have, if they're running specific builds, they can have a huge amount of like crit or guaranteed crits on certain abilities. And crits are outsized. They're not scaled for PvP. And this is something that I'll also mention in the monk section with Gloom Guide, is that crit, if you're able to crit on abilities, your health, like, it doesn't matter how big your health pool is. You can almost get two-shot by, like, say someone with like 280,000 health. A 2 or 3K barb can come in and get you down to about 20% in next to no time, 2 to 3 hits, if they're able to land a specific combo on.
Now, are we particularly thinking that this is all innate problems of Barbarian, or is it kind of the perfect storm of the battlegrounds are built in a way that the very particular set of skills this Barbarian happens to have, is perfect for the task at hand? I mean, how much of column A, how much of column B is it?
I think in BG you need to have a melee character that can withstand melee attacks and can have their survivability. I thought that the Crusader should have been that class. That's why I end up going Crusader, being that it's the only melee character that have actually armor and a shield, but instead Barbarian is the one that plays that role. You need to have that. It's great. I don't say to balance the class take that away. But I think what Shabbat was mentioning, timing of some of the skills, it plays a huge role. Like the duration of Undying. I guess it's just the timing. I guess to make it more fair, you got to look at the duration of that. I see so many people blowing Necros playing corpse lance, blowing their lances on barbs that does no damage. And list goes on in a lot of classes that keeps wasting all of these abilities on the barbs. And it's not the barb's fault. It's just the player not knowing how to properly play their class, I guess, blowing cooldowns too early. But barbs does have like an undying, like a literal undying that I just don't know how else to fix blood timing.
So do we all agree that the Undying is too much? Does it need to be scaled back if we're talking balance changes?
They could fix this in multiple ways. I feel like on defense you could increase the cap, or on either also on attack you could increase the duration of your res timer. Allow it to go higher than 12 seconds to make sure that people aren't able to get back to the points as fast, and make dying more taxing. I mean, it makes Undying Rage's value still is as high. It still is like the cooldown can remain the same, but they're not able to just spend 10 seconds or 10 seconds pretty much invulnerable, and then if they get another cheat death, another 5, and sit on the point and prevent a cap. And increasing the duration, making those deaths more taxing, would solve the issue. I also think that Undying's value would still be just still very high. And to Lida's point, is that the lethality in battlegrounds, or in PvP in general, is just so high that when health pools disappear in fractions of a second, like your frames, even at the highest level, it's not exclusive to you hear a lot of people, whales will just one shot players, or low resonance. It happens to very high resonance. You can get one shot at pretty much every level of the game. And when you have a class that's completely invulnerable for X amount of time, the value of that is massive. And same with a well-timed conjuration of light, providing your party with immunity, gives you a huge advantage. But yeah, go ahead.
What might be helpful is if during the undying or the immunity phase that they are movable or players are movable. So if they're just sitting there diving the point and they're just sitting there in that immunity phase, that a monk or a satyr or a whirlwind pull can get them off that point while they're just in that phase to help move that idol along.
Yeah, nerfing Undying Rage could render the class useless. True. But I think I agree with what Ashward's saying. Duration, increased duration of resurrect or something. Like I don't say nerf the Undying. Yeah, that could let it go one round, but consistently happening. Or
I
it
think
bothers me that what you said that the strife debuff didn't work. The timing on the strife debuff. I didn't even know about that. Like that is so broken.
Yeah, we noticed a difference in some of the which attributes were no longer applying. I think early in the game, some of the higher lethality ones, things on your secondary page, if they showed up on your stat sheet, then they actually did apply. That got kind of silently changed, and we started noticing that crit rates were noticeably lower. That attack speed was no longer working, and that cooldowns were started being different in and outside of battlegrounds. This is before some of the essences to increase the duration, so which would have given them near permanent uptime inside of near permanent uptime or extremely short cooldown for it. But I think another just to kind of shift back to the original question, is what could be something that allows this to be more scalable, is that I think it would be interesting to introduce essences to counter an immutability or break an immunity. So say a conjuration, if you could spec into something I know that there's a lot of focus on making Grim Scythe possibly viable. What if Grim Scythe had a single target immunity break? Shattering Throw for a warrior and WoW, or you could pop a Paladin's Bubble. You have to give something up for it. You use a skill that not a lot of people use and is really not viable at high levels of play, and is very, very dangerous for say a Necromancer or a range class to deal with, and gives it a reasonably long cooldown to remove the immunity and kind of end it early, allowing them to be killable. Obviously, it would have to be in melee range, but that's something that would be I thought would be an interesting way to make it either more balanced, but not in a way that allows range classes to just have complete dominance. They have to give something up. You have to use one of your 4 precious skill slots for it. But I think a lot of the things would be resolved by adjusting lethality. I think that's probably my biggest recommendation is to increase the survivability of all classes to a significant degree, and just to make things more dynamic.
So I've got all these points written down at the moment, but kind of making some notes of that. So we are doing both PvE and PvP for every class. So let's wrap up the Barbarian and move on to the Wizard, talking about PvE first, and then we'll talk about PvP for the Wizard. So, starting, any thoughts initially with the Wizard? I know it had probably maybe the most fun combination in the game, which is the Crystal Beam combo.
I think Wizard's not only fun, but I think it's very versatile. Whether it's free to play or high resonance, it does kind of require different builds depending on where you kind of lay in that power scale. But there's a number of options of viable builds, all of which are kind of engaging and just enjoyable to play in general.
The only problem I had with Wizard, because I don't PvP generally on a mobile app. I use my iPad for a lot of PvE stuff, and I had a hard time aiming the beam on the crystal on my iPad, and I would go side to side to side, and it would never be precisely hit that crystal, so it was a little wonky for me. So I don't know if there's any ability to tune that. I don't have that issue on PC though.
Okay, I'll write that part down. In terms, go on. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
You're right on that. I'm having the same issue. One of my highest alt, I switched to Wizard, and I'm having issues with the crystals, not only in PvE but also PvP. Especially since apparently you can use the crystals from other people, not just yours. It sometimes the beams don't hit, doesn't show the off stream. Um, and in the PvP side, I've been trying where you put the crystal behind the boss and you shoot a beam through the boss that supposedly does damage, hit the crystal, bounces back to the boss, so you do like double damage, and sometimes you don't see that it's there and you don't see the tick of the damage, so I don't even know if it's working or not.
Okay, so some of the bug issues. In terms of DPS, how do we feel about single target and AoE DPS?
Pretty sweet in PvE. Probably one of the better ones of all the classes. I didn't play Wizard very long, but I pushed with it really well and enjoyed the open world farming on it. Dungeon farming was great. Movement speed, everything. It's very, very enjoyable and pretty balanced, I think.
I'd agree with that as well. I might even dare to say that they might be the most balanced class in PvE.
Okay.
I agree with Lida there. I think that they're either top tier or nearly like the most complete class in PvP or PvE. I would say is that they have a variety of builds that are very viable for different types of modes, and have a lot of very like kind of class fantasy or a lot of class fantasy mechanics that work extremely well and are like brilliant. Honestly, I think they're if you've ever used the beam mages, the essence, I think, what's it called, for your skeletal mages, they actually work with the crystal. So you can, if you have somebody on your team that in battlegrounds or something, if they pop a crystal, you can pop your beam mages down. It was a very, very cool mechanic. And I think that they perform, or Wizards perform generally the best in challenge rifts. I think the world first clears are almost exclusively done by Wizards. Their ability to clear packs of mobs, they're able to spawn the boss very, 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 very early into the timer at ridiculous damage deficits or CR deficits, and to a point where I think no other class can really come close to it. But I think that's probably like it's very balanced. I wouldn't change really a thing for Wizards in PvE.
So I think we're probably all going to agree on that. I kind of tend to have the same feedback myself. Wizard seems fine in PvE. Doesn't feel like it's overpowered. Doesn't feel like it's weak by any means. But I played it on my free-to-play. It feels fine. On the pay-to-win, it feels fine too. Now let's move on to PvP in interest of keeping it a little bit shorter here. I am going to go first on PvP Wizard. I'm just going to say this. Wizard is the class that I feel the most frustrated to play against. No matter what class I am playing, the class for me that feels frustrating to play against is always the Wizard. I feel like the range of the beam is the most frustrating thing in the game. Like, I can get hit from somebody that I literally can't even see. And for me, that's highly frustrating. I could talk about the freeze and the stun mechanics, but I think that's more inherently a problem with PvP and not having diminishing returns. And then there's the argument about you kind of need the stuns anyway or else there'd be problems. So I'm not sure how I feel about the CC part of the game. But for me, the actual frustration comes from Wizard more than any other class. You constantly have clones that get made, so you can get tricked into like hitting the wrong guy all the time, which is really frustrating, even though it's like a newbie problem. I know like it can still happen or it can block stuff, and that gets really frustrating. For me, Wizard is just single-handedly the most frustrating class to play against in PvP, but it also feels just as good when you're on the other side of it and you're launching nukes from orbit and hitting people from... You're killing people you literally can't even see. Feels pretty good. I don't know how you guys feel about Wizard.
I see a crystal, I run. I wait for that to go down, and then I chase the wizard down and try to take him out. If they're using like a beam build, but they're not as frustrating to me, I guess, because I'm like a bit aggressive with my necro. But when I see like Azarath playing with his battle mage build that is like kind of like the ones that goes behind, like the wizard that has the mentality that goes on the back of the line. Like those guys are very dangerous, and they just, especially if they have 3,000 potency, they just chew through anything. They're strong characters, but I think the wizard is just like the demon hunter. If you're a smart player and you know your mechanics, you're going to be a killer player. I think it's uh, I think it's kind of a fair class. I don't have issues like that with the wizard.
I would actually say that they're probably my second to last. Kind of, they're one of the worst, or kind of worst classes in PvP currently. For me, or the weakest. I think Battle Mage has some significant, or it used to be significantly more viable, but with the advent of things like stun invocations and the abundance of CC and lethality, I'm playing a melee type melee version of a wizard is a very, very dangerous kind of setup, and is very hard. It has an extremely high skill cap. But also the like mechanics and kind of timings that you need to be able to achieve, like get the combo like Azarath would be able to get off, is very, very high. There's a lot of battle mage wizards that will try it, and it'll take a long time for them to kind of ramp up. Just because you need to time the ability to or time the amount of orbs that you have, and be able to allow like all 8 of them to hit. However, I think the one thing that they're kind of missing in that regard is a bit like reliable way to kind of escape danger. There's issues with teleport being interrupted. Even though it has 3 charges, those can easily get consumed or nullified by any kind of knock-up or pull mechanic. Any of the there's so many different types of interrupts where you can just end up falling over dead. And again with the melee class issue is that wizards, all range classes in DI have a 40%, or all melee classes have 40% damage reduction, kind of as a baseline. Wizards do not have that. And if they're playing some character that is required to be close to their opponents, then they're just going to soak up so much more damage. And if they can't play at a safe distance, and when there is like less CC in the game, and their abilities like teleport allowing them to extract themselves from a dangerous situation, we're more liable to be available or not be interrupted. I think that viability has gone significantly down. Beam mages, I think, are still viable, but very, very kind of almost one-dimensional. There's not a lot of extra stuff that they do that is particularly dangerous, other than they're like crystal. The beams often do not show up when they're from an enemy crystal. So you can't tell when a beam mage is attacking you, largely, other than just seeing a crystal being placed on the ground. And that's more of a kind of like core animation mechanic that affects a lot of classes. Being able to see when you're actually taking damage would be I think that issue kind of fixes itself if you're able to fix the animation optimization that's happening there. And same with things like necros being invisible in wraith form if they proc it, or they do activate the skill at a sufficient distance away from the player that they end up fearing or kind of coming onto the screen.
And Amber, you spent some time playing Wizard, didn't you?
Oh yeah. There's a few things. I played Wizard. I stopped playing it for 2 reasons. One was it was super OP. I'm 7,200 resonance, and I was just melting everybody. So it was just really boring. Like one-dimensional is a great way to put it. And the other reason why was because the Wizard is. I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought there. There is a glitch that I wanted to bring up really quick. That happens, and there's a specific skill where if you die within it, you do get slow bugged. So we probably want to bring that to the attention of the devs. I don't think I want to say it on stream.
Yeah, you can submit it. I can submit it as a bug report.
Yeah. The wizard was just really one of the things that really frustrates me though in PvP is, and the second reason for the wizard being OP is if you are against a very strong wizard, I don't care how good you are at countering that particular wizard, your team's going to get fried. So especially if you're on offense against a strong wizard, they're going to melt 55 players before you can even get an inch. So that's one thing that's when I see a 7K wizard on the other side and half my team's 3K or lower, I'm like, okay, this is a wrap. Because they're going to get fried, and it's I don't want to tell people, hey, don't respawn, because we just are going to lose on kills. But I feel like with the burst damage, with the grace set, with the invisible beams, and the freeze that just traps you, forever. Sometimes it feels like even smaller wizards can do a lot of damage. But somebody has to be, I guess the class has to be second to last, right? Because there's only so many of them.
It's only so many. And Lily, did you have any points about the wizard you want to make before we wrap up the wizard and move on to the other class? We'll do the other classes a little bit quicker because we are running a little bit long here. And I'll try to get everyone out the door here a little bit faster. But
no, I had nothing to add that hasn't been said.
Okay, gotcha. So let's wrap up the wizard conversation there. We got some points on both sides of that one. Let's move on to DH, and we'll talk about PvE real quick, and we'll move on to PvP. How are we feeling about PvE for the Demon Hunter?
Personally, I think they still do large amounts of damage, but since all classes are getting increases in damage, the advantage of being a Demon Hunter is kind of slowly diminishing. And as more things are added to the game, say the Essence Mastery System or new regular gems that are just going to increase your output even more, then that's just going to be further kind of amplified. And when a class loses its identity, so to speak, it's just never in a great spot.
It's a pretty good point there about how everyone is damaged, so it doesn't really matter as much to have damage anymore. Do we have any other points there that agree about that one, disagree? How are we feeling about PvE?
So PvE, I haven't played the DH yet, but I've seen a lot of them in action, and I do feel like they are the strongest single target damage out there. I mean, I know I see how well they do in the right against the Immortals with their powerful DPS and range. So I think PvE, they are good to go. But I mean, when PvE and people, in this game first launched in PvP, the DHs were the meta. You see a strong DH on the other side, it was a wrap. And then they got their knockbacks and their fears and their stuns and their freezes and their traps and all these other things. And now all of a sudden they're crying because they haven't gotten buffed in a while. So I don't have any much more to say about the DH because I haven't played it yet, but I hope to try it soon.
Like Amber mentioned, yeah, a Shadow War, Rite of Exile, BH is. I mean, I see a lot of people changing class back to Demon Hunter when it's when the clan is trying to get an edge, and a lot of the Challenge Rift players, Demon Hunters are very high up on the board because of they're just strong players. I meet a lot of smart Demon Hunters that run some crazy combinations. Chip was a huge, I guess, benefit to the DH. But yeah, it's just overall, I think it's strong. I don't think they need buffs. I think if you buff a Demon Hunter, then everybody's going to be crying that the Demon Hunter got buffed because they are very strong. If you're strong, you got to be smart. The Demon Hunter, you just got to get smart. You got to, I guess, like every class, you can't miss your rotations. You got to know your combos and keep vengeance up as much as possible. So
okay, so that's PvE. Seems like we're all kind of on the same page. It does damage and it's good at doing damage, and that's its whole point. So it's a decent class. Let's talk about PvP in particular. How are we feeling about Demon Hunter in PvP?
I'd say they're probably the worst class in PvP. However, I don't think that that's strictly because of them as a class. I feel similar to how I feel about Barbs, and it's more a reflection of the actual battleground itself as opposed to the class. So I think that Demon Hunter is fairly well balanced if the situation were different, but since the only thing we have to compare classes is essentially the one battleground mode, they're just weak. They lack the ability to push on attack, and if you can't win on attack, your win rate will be noticeably lower than other classes. One thing I would say that Demon Hunters do exceptionally well for PvP is they are very solid in the Rite of Exile free-for-all.
Oh yeah, because you do have some pretty decent skill shots. I feel like you can
Skill shots, arguably the best range of any class, and the ability to focus your damage without hitting your allies.
Yeah, true. Good point.
Demon hunters that I see on the East Coast playing that peekaboo build, which I call it, with the legs right after a 50% crit hit after you come back from a smoke screen. They hit really hard, and especially if two demon hunters pair with each other side by side. I think like DH is like one of those classes in BG that if you really you're a support in downing whoever you're going up against, right? So if a DH try to go up solo, like a lot of people in BG try to solo take on a pack, but like just the DH to me feels like when I play mine, I have to play kind of like how I used to play the Crusader. I got to be a support to somebody else who does burst damage. I got to be a support to somebody else who have a few amount of CCs. And you know, I see a lot of great demon hunters, 3,000 reds players that are destroying 5K players just by playing aggressive, going in the back of the line, and just smartly using their smoke screen to bring a monk together with them. There's some smart DHs that I see in PvP to say that though I don't see them taking MVPs majority of the matches. I do see the impact that a good Demon Hunter brings into a battleground. I love when a Demon Hunter gives me a smoke screen and we can go together and take, whoever's pushing the idol. Um, it's like one of those classes I love to play with, but I'm not loving playing it.
I agree with Lida on this. I think it's by far the worst class in PvP currently, and it's not close, or it's not close at all. Their kit it kind of pigeonholes them into a single, like a few variants of a core build around vengeance, and kind of maximizing a like really short DPS window. But again, as lethality and a number of immunities that pop up, that value goes down. They don't have a lot of CC, and their CC, like with the Vengeance Sphere, requires them to be very close and kind of expose themselves to a lot of danger. They're taking more damage than most classes. They don't have a shield. A lot of like both wizards and necros, who also do not have that 40% damage reduction. Both have shields that can take a huge amount of damage away. So you'll see a lot of DHs, even at the highest resonance level, get one shot if they are CC'd once. So they're the most fragile. They do comparable damage to almost every other class in terms of that, with maybe slightly higher output, and don't have a lot of build diversity. You have pretty much the same set of skills with a few different essences.
And I'll add to
I think they need a pretty big rework.
Yeah, I'm kind of if I had to put somebody at the worst, it would be DH as well. I mean, just personally, because I feel like the problem with them is they basically only provide damage. I know there's the smoke screen, which is some good points, but I don't really like something that only provides damage and like not really anything else. And then they're extremely squishy, as you say. So it feels like with higher resonance, maybe the gap closes a little bit, because damage gets more important. But
I would say it does not. Yeah, I think it's resonance invariant. And a lot of demon hunters at that extremely high resonance will end up having some severe issues against majority of classes. And I think win rates at some what players like Ludra or Sheriff or Adelice at the highest level their win rates are consistently lower than like even on defense, let alone like attack is pretty much unwinnable. You can't carry a team, but even on defense, you have no ability to really stop a push or sit on an idol and deny the ability. You're kind of the PvP mode is very, very frustrating for them.
Okay, so
what might be
go
an
on.
interesting skill for demon hunters would be similar to the Amazon, where you had the decoy. If you could spawn a decoy on the idol that's lasts several seconds, that acts like it, and the idol thinks it's a real player and it stops it.
That could be cool.
That would be a real good buff for stopping on a offensive push.
I could see that. That would be kind of an interesting skill. I could go from being maybe the worst to kind of OP. I could see that comparing with stuff like Barbarians being kind of nuts. Let's move on to Monk here, as we're moving just over half the classes down here, moving on to Monk. Now let's talk about PvE real quick. I'll throw this one out there. For me, from a fun factor, I think Monk is the funnest class in PvE. I love the fact that you can teleport between each and like every minion. I think the Firestorm builds are fun. I think the challenge rifts feel actually challenging and fun to play. Just from like a subjective, I'm having a good time with the game, Monk's some of the funnest I've ever had, and I'll start it at there. Where are you guys feeling about Monk and PvE?
I leveled up from the beginning of the game until about into the before Hell 7 came out as a monk. So PvE wise, you're right on. Monk was super fun. Fast to move, a lot of mobility, a lot of burst damage. Server first in Challenge Rift for my server has been Monk for everything. Besides once that he was a wizard, but yeah. I love PvE Monk.
All right, I'm going to add that I like the Firestorm. Any class that can do Firestorm builds available for me are become more interesting as well. Mix it up a little bit. They also have the Mystic Allies, which are kind of fun. How do you feel about overworld farming? Are they in the top for overworld farming for you guys, or you feel like they're a little bit lackluster there?
I think they're decent overworld farmers. However, I find that Monk plays differently, whether you're playing on, say, mobile controller or PC.
Agreed.
And that's the biggest negative I have about Monk Balance is actually that it's a completely different class depending on how you're playing. And what really needs to be balanced is just some of the flow or the ease of use of certain skills. What I like most about the Monk is that depending on what content you're doing, the build seems to vary a lot, and it's really enjoyable to play a class that uses, say, all of the skills available to you, as opposed to just using the same skills with different essences depending on the content.
I think those are some pretty good points there as well. So how about PvP? How are we feeling about Monk and PvP then? I know that we all consider maybe the highest burst damage potential in short periods of time, or how you guys feel about Monk and PvP currently?
It's probably the truest form of an assassin class that there is, so they definitely have high burst damage. And the biggest issue, and what needs balancing the most for monks, in my opinion, is that since they have that innate 40% damage reduction that melee classes have, with the tweaks and additions to the game that have come allowing Shimmer to kind of shine forward, monks are basically a range class. They're using Shimmer with the extended range and the increased width, which isn't even indicated on the tooltip, but they're getting that damage reduction. So they're essentially like a ranged melee class that you can't really take out, and it's really just kind of toxic.
Yep. And dialogue to that sucks.
Yeah, Shimmer.
Yeah, I've been peer pressured into going monk, and I've, kind of said no. I don't want to make more people quit the game. Or it is a very frustrating class to play against. And there's exploits being used by these monks. There's mobile where they're tweaking their internet speed, and then you can't CC them at all. They're running around without taking any damage.
What?
Yeah, so it is really frustrating. It's really sad that they're so OP, but yet they still have to cheat. You know what I mean? So that is broken. It seems like they fixed the monk falling through the floor issue, so that's really great. There is nothing more frustrating than getting followed around by an invisible monk that is knocking you up. So I haven't noticed it recently. I don't know if anybody else has. But I've heard it is a blast to play, and probably because you're wrecking everybody, right? Wrecking everything in PvE and PvP. But it's the only class I have not yet played.
I think the way Leela put it's pretty accurate. It's true to the assassin. Like, I feel like when I was playing monk and I was abusing the PvP, basically I was just jumping on the back line, getting 1, 2, 3 kills, and basically blowing myself up. I would die half the time, but I feel like I could instantaneously kill almost anybody, and I never felt that way with almost any other class. I feel like I have to earn it, set it up, think about the moves, etc. But monk, it's like if I can get on top of them, I know they're dead.
Right.
Monk, to me, I think that my biggest issue with Monk balance currently is that it has been a phenomenal assassin class, like the best one since for a while now. But what's changed with Shimmer is that it's turned into a team kill, my ability, like the ability to kill entire groups as opposed to targeting one person and stun locking or CC locking them and pretty much taking them out of the match, with skills like Imprison Fist and being able to chain a combo, for like knockbacks and CCs that like certain monks were phenomenal at that and would impact the game like massively in that way by just say, I'm going to target this one player that is a danger to my team and just make their lives hell. With like Shimmerlin and Wave of Light, especially with Gloom Guide 6 and 4 piece, I think have made this really, really rough for a lot of classes. And it's decreased the floor for monks, in terms of like the skill cap. The Imprisoned Fist spec is a very, very high skill requirement. You have to be able to train your mouse on your target, keep track of where they are, and be able to pull off the combo because you have to target a single player. With Wave of Light, you can just hit it. It goes in all directions. I have died many times to massive crits from the Gloom Guide 4 piece, which is near 100% uptime in combat, and just taking damage from players that didn't even know I was near them. And I probably was out of their field of view. I've died to I find myself consistently dying to monks that didn't mean to kill me, or weren't trying to do any damage to me.
That's happened to me too, actually. That's funny you mentioned that, because that's definitely happened to me in PvP. Where I'll be walking by somebody and like two other guys are fighting, and then I'll just see this tip of this red bomb, and it just hits me, and I instantly die. I'm like, I know he didn't even see me, and is wondering why he just got a double kill.
I think with to Lyda's point about the damage reduction of they're like a range class that has this incredible skill set for CC negation, which Shield of Zen provides. But there's some issues with Shield of Zen that make it very hard for a lot of classes to kind of deal with. I think one is a Necromancer. The shield, there's certain things there's a bug with the Shield of Zen animation that makes Corpse Lance fizzle like 75% of the time. When they have it up, and when you need an on-demand skill to actually like hit a monk, to break the Zen and be able to CC them, and your skill actually will go through the animation but not actually cast anything. That's been very frustrating, and you actually have to, and with changes to how targeting Corpse Lance on PC has made it increasingly difficult. I also. Shield of Zen, I think, is a little bit overtuned, and maybe all immunities, all like kind of CC immunity abilities in general. So Shield, if you have a knockback, like a skill that is spec'd into a knockback, like say the Bone Spikes with the Abnegation Shoulders, if you try and do that onto a monk or a somebody that is running like a Bone Shield with knock-up immunity, it doesn't actually do any damage. So it completely will negate any damage because there's a knockup attached to it. And so for kits that have or speccing into CCs, you actually can't break through the shield at all, because a lot of your active abilities, so you're left with either primary attack or just kind of left to your own device, and they're able to kind of free roam and have almost 100% uptime on a full immunity that also negates a huge amount of damage that would have like normally been able to break through the CC immunity.
So let me ask this question to the group then. Do you guys believe that Monk is at the position where it probably needs a reduction, or should we be bringing other abilities up to its level? Do you think we need less damage from the Monk? How are you guys feeling about the balance? Yeah, is it okay where it's at, and other classes need to be up to its level, or should we be pulling it down a little bit?
They have the best mobility and the best shield, and the only melee class with complete negation of total loss of control. So it's a little OP. And if they had some form of diminishing return after hitting multiple targets with their abilities, I wouldn't mind if the shield lasted as long as it did. But to have they have the best shield, man. They can prevent everything. And if you don't have the Necro popping their shield, they will destroy any right group.
Yeah, I agree with that personally. I think the fact that you can have the best mobility but also be one of the tankiest on top of having the most damage is you're not sacrificing anything in order to get each one of those. You just get it all.
And you can't find them. One of the main issues that I have besides the shield, which thankfully with the Necro now I can pop it. Even if I die, at least the rest of the team can take them down. Is you can't target something you can't, like you can't hit something you can't target, right? So with these combos that keeps bouncing them all over the map, and you can like you never sit still for more than a second in a spot. That you
Yeah.
allow for your spike to actually resolve, right? Because the moment you cast your spike, it doesn't go right away. There's like a second you gotta wait for the animation to hit, and by the time that my spike hits, the guy already went somewhere else. So it's impossible to fight something you can't see.
Do we all agree with these points, I'm assuming?
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Let's move on then. We got 2 classes left. We got Crusader and Necromancer. So let's move on to Crusader PvE. And let's talk about this. For me, I'll start here because I think this one's fairly obvious. But Holy Banner's amazing. Right? We all agree Holy Banner's amazing. The Flaming Circle, what is it called? The Fire Judgment? Or I forget exactly which one it is. But
Conjuration of Light.
it's the Conjuration of Light Flaming Circle. That one, it seems to be amazing as well. How you guys feel about its Challenge Rift abilities?
I didn't like it as much. I couldn't push as much because your shield, if you use a Conjuration of Light for the shield purpose, you don't last 3 seconds. And yeah, with a 20-second cooldown, it's the Crusader have the worst shield in the game. I even think the Necro shield is better than the Crusader shield.
I loved the Crusader pushing challenge rifts. I used the Holy Banner that reduced damage, as well as the Conjuration of Light, and the Horse with Stun, with Chip of Stone Flesh. So I felt that I still feel like Crusader's my favorite class.
Hey, how you feel about overworld farming as well?
Oh, I love circle farming with the Crusader. There was nothing funner than that.
I mean, you have a horse. What's not to love?
Yeah.
The only thing is with open world farming, it's like, the banner. I don't like to carry the banner. It doesn't last very long. I like the stationary banner personally.
Mm-hmm.
But it was just, there's not a lot of open world farm skills. I mean, I was like using the falling sword, which is stationary too, and you're moving so much. So I think if there was a little bit more pizzazz to attack while mobile, that would be great in PvE.
The main issue in the Crusader PvE or all around is the essence. Once you awaken the essence on the Crusader, like the Holy Banner essence, once you put a rank 10 gem in there, it increases the life of your Holy Banner. And you don't need your Holy Banner to increase the life if you're using the helmet that it moves with you. So it becomes a complete waste to have a rank 10 gem, on something that you're not using. And it's not just for the helmet, it's also for the shield on the Crusader. You put a rank 10 gem in there, it increases the life of your Holy Banner. Like, what's the point of that, right? It's waste.
Good points. Okay, I got that down there as well. That's good.
I think it's important as well that not all classes have to be perfectly even or perfectly balanced. And if the Crusader's best asset is being grouped with another player, that's still appealing to a lot of players as well.
Yeah, I still think that Crusaders or somebody, like when I'm playing casually, I just always want a Crusader in my party, and I think that innately gives the class some value too. All right, so let's PvE. I think most people tend to agree on. It's decently well known for Crusader. The one I'm really curious to hear you guys' opinions on is where you think Crusader is at in PvP, because I did not enjoy playing Crusader in PvP personally, but I know people in here. I mean, Amber, are you still playing Crusader in PvP currently?
No, but I will be going back. It is my very favorite class in PvP, and I actually got yelled at for not helping you with your Crusader. So I'm sorry I was there for you. But I heard you were a Crusader for a week, and I would love to, help you tweak your build. But I went to Crusader because of the crowd control and the support. So I'm an objective player. I'm not a kill chaser. I like to win, and I like to help my team win, not just myself, right? So I feel like the Crusader is the most well-rounded class to not only make a difference in a win or loss in battlegrounds as far as crowd control, but also helping support if you're a clutch satyr and you know how to throw up a conjuration of light at the right second, you could win a lot more with a great satyr on your team.
I would say Crusaders are the most underrated class in PvP in the entire game. The difference between a good Crusader and a bad Crusader is incredibly noticeable. Being a good Crusader requires you to know and manage your own cooldowns, know and manage your teammates' cooldowns, and know your opponent's cooldowns. And the number of Crusaders that are able to do that are very few and far between. And the advantage that you have and the ability to turn the match in your favor when you do so is just incredible. Anybody that typically says that Crusaders are weak in PvP is, unfortunately, in my opinion, probably just not a great PvPer themselves, and there's nothing bad or wrong with that. Everybody's at different skill levels, but even in a game that's considered pay to win, there's a large difference in skill gaps between individual players at similar resonance.
So I would compound with like on what Lida said, is that some of the most impactful players in the game are low resonance Crusaders that are able to manage their cooldowns and kind of have the high level of situational awareness, and that is one of the most impactful classes that when played at a high level can effectively carry a win in a way that other classes can't, because you're able to manage team fights with conjuration, banner, but again, that requires you to adopt like a support. Though you're not going to get kills, you're going to you're there to support your teammates and kind of make sure the objectives or team fights are won. The only thing that I find that might need to be adjusted, and this is more of a bug, like more of a kind of suite of bugs, is that with Condemn, one of the best abilities in the game, there's a lot of bugs with kind of knockbacks in the game. And Condemn, since it's not an active cooldown, like an active ability, it pulls people in at an interval, and the radius is very large. There's a lot of issues with rubber banding, a lot of like kind of, have you ever been like pulled across like two screens apart? I've had Condemn actually make me teleport basically two full screens away on the map. Just because like I'm not sure what's going on there. There's some server stability issues or some latency that's going on. But they can cause inadvertent deaths or abilities to not feel responsive in PvP. But overall, I would agree with all the points. I think most underrated class, viable at many different resonance levels, but might not be one that you want to play if you're like maybe an AD carry in League of Legends or something. This is not maybe the class for you. You have to want to play support, and you have to like enjoy playing that at a high level to really get the most out of class.
I left my Crusader because of bugs that I was suffering in BG with the Crusader. My shield was getting constantly interrupted. If I had any kind of hot on me between burn, bleed, I mean, you name it, Crusader is the only class that can absorb, I guess, every single CC at any time. And my shield was getting interrupted, going on a 20-second cooldown. It was very frustrating playing with, at the high level with these guys that don't miss a single cooldown rotation. And, but yeah, that's exactly how I had to play. You had to be a support, even being a lower res, and that's the best to play that character like that. For anybody that likes support, Crusader is the ultimate support in PvP.
One thing I always say when people ask me about the Satyr when they're struggling with it, it's a very slow and deliberate class. I mean, you do have to know your skill rotations. You got to watch those cooldowns. You can't blow them. You don't have, pillars and spikes and all these things that just last on and on and on. So you have to be very tactical as a Satyr and be prepared to play support in the full mode.
Seems like all of you are pretty much on agreement here with the Crusader in terms of PvP, which is going to carry us over to the final class, which my personal favorite, the Necromancer. So let's talk about Necromancer for PvE in particular. I know we have a couple of Necromancer players in here. You got any strong feelings on Necromancer PvE at the moment?
Love it. Nothing else to say.
It is fairly strong.
I did. I did get frustrated with the Necromancer PvE pushing. The single target damage for me was frustrating, especially when you're trying to push hard in the challenge rifts. I had to reforge all of my gear for single target damage just to get a first clear at one point, and then reforge it all back for PvP. So I'm predominantly PvP, so that was super frustrating for me, but I bit the bullet and did it. But as far as, team play and open world farming, it's kind of like cruise control. I really love the Necromancer.
I like the concept of cruise control class. That's a good way to put it. Like, it's very relaxed. It feels like a very relaxed, fun way to play the game. I feel like the overworld farming is easy. I feel like the dungeons are fairly easy. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I think maybe it has the best single target DPS in the game. Burst potential, at least, with the things like the summons, the dark curse, shepherds, etc. I feel like I really, really, really like Necro in PvE. It feels very enjoyable, and I don't really think it's OP because it's hard to even be OP in PvE. Nothing really matters in PvE that much, but I think it's one of the stronger ones.
Versatile. Any set, most of its essence besides Grim, right? I enjoyed playing multiple different builds. All you guys put up crazy Necro content out there, and I love trying new builds, and it's always fun to try.
I'd also say it's very versatile, very similar to the Wizard, really, in terms of PvE balance. And really the difference is that Necro might be more or better single target and less AoE, and the Wizard is more AoE and less single target. But they're both fairly well balanced, in my opinion.
That's a good way of putting it, I think. Which brings us to the Necromancer PvP, which maybe they get the title for one of the most annoying classes to play against. I mean, I said Wizard's the most frustrating for me personally, but Necromancer is just annoying. Like, the instantaneous knockup can be quite annoying, which I love to do, by the way. It's very fun to use the Necromancer in PvP. I think maybe one of the better CC classes, maybe the best CC class. How do you guys feel about that?
I think no one would disagree with it being the most annoying class and having the most annoying kit. I think the abundance of CC there if you spec into it, any Necromancer can get 6 charges of knockup, a 12-second cooldown, like fear state, and mobility cooldown that allows you to take multiple players out of the game for a full chip of stone flesh proc. Fear duration. You can wall off enemies there. With really no recourse to the enemies. You can wall people in with bone pillar or bone wall, prevent them from moving anywhere. I would say the kit is almost a bit too much compared to other classes, given that they also have the ability to do a high amount of burst damage when spec'd appropriately. I believe my biggest issue with Necromancers right now is that you're kind of stuck in these specs that are high, either like pure CC, which not many classes have recourses for, or a burst skill set or a burst loadout, which is what I run primarily with, things like Corpse Lance, Bleed Spikes, and Proximal Fear, Wraith Pants. Leads to a lot. There's not a lot of build diversity that comes with it. You need these things to be viable, and they end up being toxic and causing other players to be frustrated or because they don't really have a counter for it, and there's nothing that they can do to really prevent it. Which on some levels, I kind of agree. I feel like Necromancer really shines as the anti-ranged, but they have too much ability to kind of I think their hard counter right now is monks, but I think that it needs, if I were to say the balance, in terms of balance, they are probably, since the beginning of the game, the top, or if not a close second of based off of some of the essence changes, PvP class in the game. Their kit is just unassailable.
Yeah. I feel like it's pretty easy to use, too. As a Necromancer, I feel like it's pretty plug and play. You just pick it up. The CC is decently quick and easy to land, and obvious on what to do. Just CC the big people. Try your best not to die. I also like Wraith Form, kind of like a panic mode type button. I think there's some bugs related to invisibility, from what I'm aware, that need to get fixed on that still. I don't think those have been fixed yet. Am I correct in my understanding here?
They
Correct.
have not.
But it's not
So-
just the Necro. Apparently, it's every class. I mean, Crusaders, Wizards, is anybody who does any kind of sprint, right, outside the screen.
Yeah.
It has to do with the animation change. So anything that changes your actual like character model I think the issue with Necromancers is that there is a a hard CC attached to that. So if you can't see it coming, you can't avoid it, you can't prepare. Whereas other classes though just come up and hit you. I think that bug has been in the game for probably 6 months now, and I think affects Necro versus Necro too. Like I think no one wants this no one wants this bug in the game. No one is enjoying it.
I'm sure it's going to get fixed when the invisible wizard beams get fixed. Probably all in the same patch, right?
Oh yeah. I think it is the same issue. So it might.
Well,
Can't damage what you can't see, right? And it's it's untargetable. It's not just that it's invisible. Like I've tried to throw spikes on an invisible Necro on the path, and he walks over and it doesn't take the damage. So
yeah, I know.
They're only invisible for the duration of Wraith form. So as soon as they come out or cast an ability or break the animation, they will be visible and targetable. You wouldn't have been except for some cases where there was an issue where whole groups of people were going invisible, and like there's a period of like 2 weeks back in like October that was happening. Barbs were able to replicate it consistently, and you would just be invisible for 30 seconds to whole groups of players.
Well, and the Necromancer can use the Wraith form for quite a while, depending upon its build, too. Like, you can extend the duration, and then you can go from quite a ways off the screen and then pop out in the middle of the nowhere, which can be very frustrating. But I think you guys are right that no one wants this bug. So hopefully this one gets fixed at some point. We've got through all the classes here, and in interest of keeping it short, do we have any last points you guys want to make about is there any major point that you had to put forward about either PvP or PvE in terms of class balance changes? How are you guys feeling about these classes at the moment? One last thing.
I have a few things I'd like to add that are not specific to class.
Sure.
But one is the party bug issue is really, I mean, it could really make or break your ability to do well in Battlegrounds if you can't form a party. And can they just institute a cancel queue penalty, please? The cancel queues are ridiculous. I mean, we're online for 30 minutes waiting for a battleground, and it's canceling like 500 times because people are trying to queue in together. That would really make it a lot better for many of us.
on my server, apparently people are doing the cancel because there's a talk that you can, if you're on the bottom or if you're in specific locations, you can get defense. And majority of the people want to play defense because they can have a higher chance in winning the PG. So a lot of people are canceling if they're not getting where they want to be.
I thought they fixed that a long time ago, though. They
did.
randomized it.
That no longer is a thing, but people still do think it's a thing, so people are still doing it. Like they think it still works. Basically, we need to make videos or something, being like, please stop doing this for people to understand, because it might just be like an information thing. Like once people realize they can't actually pick what side of the team they're on, then they'll stop doing it.
I mean, they should realize if they get the bottom and they're, I'm on offense. Oh, what happened? I thought I got on the bottom. You know?
You would think, but
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes people just autopilot. I don't know. But,
and I do have one more thing. Sorry. Can we make it so you can't get invited to a raid or summoned to Shadow War while you're in Battlegrounds and lose 50 points? That really angered me on stream. I was winning a Battleground after having a very bad session, and all of a sudden got summoned to Shadow War and accidentally hit accept and got immediately ported out in minus 50 points. So I went negative 100 on that freaking match.
That happened to me too. The match I was against you, if you remember, I was live and I was dead and I was spamming the resurrection button. And they put the button to accept the Shadow War summons directly on top of the resurrection, which is just it's just the stupidest position for that possible, but whatever. Anyway, Okay, so we got that one out. Any other last points here for me to add on the list before we're on the way out the door, everybody?
Yeah, I guess the only closing comments I really have is just want to make sure that we're essentially balancing the right things. I think that with the battleground itself being so unbalanced, that potentially any changes that we make will affect any new forms of PvP that go into place. And if there's also been a lot of suggestions, not just in the conversation today, but over however many months, that there are tweaks that could be made to the game mode itself, like extending the number of kills needed on defense, allowing idols to move, etc. I won't go through them all. But if there's a reason that these aren't being made, like something along the lines that the code of the battleground is intertwined or embedded with the code for the right battles, then honestly, maybe it's just time to abandon this battleground and come out with a new one. And I guess I just really think it would be a shame if we tweak classes and tune something like Undying Rage from the Barb, and then the class is left worse off than any other class.
Yeah, I concur that battlegrounds are a bigger problem than the class balance. I think that's a pretty good point there as well.
And just because I'm, myself and others in this conversation are willing to put forward what we think about individual classes themselves need changing, I really want to stress that even though I'm offering that information, I think the bigger issue is the game mode itself.
I will. Yeah, I had +1 on that as well. I agree with that as well. I'll write that down. All right. Any last points? Anyone else have anything?
Yeah.
Go ahead. I would say that removing the amount of passive CCs. Currently, the best CC in the game is the Stun Invocation property, which has, when used with 6 invocations, has a 20-second cooldown. And if everyone is running this in PvP, does a huge amount of damage. It procs Chip with Stoneflesh. Its duration is as long as one of the most OP CCs in the game, which is single target. Wraith, the Wraith Fear is 3-second duration. The Stun Invocation is a 3-second duration, but AOE around either your the target, depending on the invocation, or the player itself, and it's reactive, so you can be CC'd and proc it. A lot of times in PvP, this is completely overtuned because one, if potency is sufficiently high, you can be, and the amount of procs are off of cooldown, you can be chain CC'd for upwards of, there's been times where it's been 10+ seconds. It makes for really unengaging gameplay if you and almost like an AF, I've played around with an AFK build that basically you just run in, get attacked, you proxy AOE CCs on everyone around you. I think it's been disastrous for the meta, making a lot of classes either not fun or not playable because you don't have control of your character. You don't have proactive gameplay style. I think CCs are not intentional. I think CCs should not be should pretty always be proactive and not reactive, especially if they are AOE and tied to damage. I think if an intent on keeping the Stun Invocation in the game, the duration and damage should be reduced significantly, and to make other invocations potentially viable in PvP. And just for the overall health of the game.
Understood.
Until we have some arena style where we can 1v1 each other and see what class is better or not, relying on Battleground to know if it's balanced or not. We need to have at least Battleground matchmaking be fair and not put 4 of one classes on one side and 4 of another class on the other side, which is constantly happen every day. You keep seeing 4 monks one side, 4 necros on the other side, or vice versa, and for different classes. If a fair class balance in the group matchmaking would make more enjoyable for a lot of people. And there's a lot of people that I know that are just give up on PvP just because it's not fair, not just beyond on some class being stronger than the other, but the game mechanics itself, right? And it becomes really, it's not a fun experience when players just get in for the daily experience, and then next thing you know, you end up losing matches after matches, and it becomes a frustrating experience, and nobody wants to play the game to be frustrated, right? If there's a better point system, incentivation, like a better incentives for Battleground, better point system. I think Battleground needs to have some better form of a different point system versus just losing your way to legends. You know, if you get points by pushing item, if you get points by activating item, if you get points for whatever, there needs to be a better like a better structure for the battleground, so then we can find more enjoyable. And I think that that would solve half of the issues that everybody have.
Understood. I got that down as well. I want to thank everyone for coming. That was Amber Turd, Lita, Sugar Rat, and Tone and Hop have all come by to chip in today and break down our opinions on where the class currently is and how everyone feels about both PvP and PvE. So thank you so much, everyone, to come. We'll have links down to everyone's channel down below, and see you guys on the next one.